My name is Salahuddin Yusuf ibn Ayyub, the unifier, the servant of the two holy cities. My life has been a bridge between kingdoms, a sword for the faith, and a shield for the land. I am the Sultan, the one who led the banners of unity against the tides of the Crusaders. I am Saladin, and watch my story, why people still love me as a hero.
He was born on a night when exile wrapped around his family like a tightening fist. Tikrit, dust-colored, river-scarred, perched on its crumbling fortress walls, had already rejected his father by the time the infant cried for the first time. Najm ad-Din Ayyub, commander of quiet dignity, and his brother Shirkuh, the storm-voiced warrior whose temper could clear a room, had defended a woman from an assault by a powerful official. It was an act of honor in a world that rarely rewarded honor. Their consequence was banishment, and so the newborn boy, wrapped in coarse wool against the cold winds of the Tigris, began his life not in safety, but on horseback, carried through darkness as his family fled the city that no longer welcomed them. No one in that fleeing caravan knew that the infant, small enough to fit in one hand, would one day tilt the axis of 3 continents. They called him Yusuf. History would rename him Salah ad-Din, the righteousness of the faith. But in those early years, he was only a quiet child trailing behind soldiers' steps and commanders' debates, absorbing the world by watching rather than speaking. In Mosul, where the Ayyubid family found refuge, Yusuf grew among scholars, jurists, and military officers. The boys around him trained with wooden swords, shouting with bravado, dreaming of battles they did not understand. Yusuf did not shout. He listened, he observed, he preferred the company of books, works of theology, jurisprudence, poetry. Teachers whispered that he would become a scholar, not a warrior. They noticed his gentleness, the way he hesitated before stepping on an insect, the way he avoided humiliating anyone, even in play. It was kindness mistaken for softness. But softness, in a turbulent century, was a misunderstanding. The Middle East groaned under crusader kingdoms, Latin lords establishing castles like thorns across Palestine and Syria. Muslim princes fought each other more eagerly than they resisted the invaders. Markets were filled with rumors of raids, murdered caravans, broken alliances. Yusuf heard the stories of Jerusalem under crusader rule, of massacres that still haunted surviving families. He listened silently, absorbing the weight of lands torn apart. His uncle Shirkuh, shaped entirely by war, looked at the boy with frustration and a strange affection. "You cannot read your way through life," Shirkuh said once, tossing him a practice spear. Yusuf caught the weapon awkwardly, not because he feared it, but because he already sensed that violence was easy and wisdom was hard. Still, he learned. In the morning, he trained. In the afternoon, he studied. The balance would later define him, a commander who could read the terrain of both earth and human nature. Under Nur ad-Din Zengi, the stern ruler of Aleppo, Yusuf entered military service almost by accident. Nur ad-Din was a man carved from discipline, his eyes always burning with a mission larger than himself, the reunification of Muslim lands and the expulsion of the Crusaders. He saw potential in Yusuf, not for his strength, but for the frightening steadiness in his character. Yusuf followed Shirkuh into battles across Syria, small skirmishes, border clashes, tense negotiations. He was not the loudest in the ranks, but officers noticed how he never panicked, how he processed information with cold clarity, even under pressure. A soldier's courage can burn out, a thinker's courage endures. Then Egypt entered his life like an unexpected storm. The Fatimid Caliphate, rich, ancient, exhausted by internal corruption, was collapsing. Crusaders sought to seize Cairo. Egyptian viziers sought alliances on both sides. Shirkuh was sent as Nur ad-Din's sword, and Yusuf reluctantly followed as his shadow. The journey to Egypt changed everything. Cairo was unlike the dusty fortresses of Syria. It was gold-painted palaces, bazaars swelling with spices, narrow alleyways where whispers mattered more than swords. Intrigue clung to every breath. In council halls, viziers smiled without sincerity. Generals exchanged looks sharper than daggers. Yusuf walked through it quietly, studying rather than posturing. He understood quickly. Egypt could either become the backbone of Muslim unity or the graveyard of ambition. Shirkuh, victorious but physically worn, died unexpectedly soon after securing power. The Fatimid court panicked. Factions whispered. Crusader armies sharpened intentions. In the chaos, a decision was made that Yusuf never sought. He was appointed vizier of Egypt. Common opinion dismissed him immediately. Too young, too meek, too inexperienced, a scholar in a warrior's throne. They underestimated the danger of misjudging a quiet man. Yusuf moved with deliberate caution. He replaced corrupt administrators, restored discipline in the army, cleaned the treasury of rot, negotiated with tribes, punished injustice swiftly. He worked not as a conqueror, but as a surgeon, repairing a dying state. Cairo began to stabilize. Soldiers respected him. Farmers trusted him. Merchants praised his fairness. Enemies grew uneasy. Yet he refused arrogance. Egypt was powerful, but unity across Syria and Iraq remained fragile. Nur ad-Din watched him with wary eyes, unsure whether his former officer was becoming too powerful. Yusuf did not rush. He waited. He aligned Egypt spiritually with Sunni Islam, ending centuries of Fatimid rule without shedding unnecessary blood. When the last Fatimid caliph died, Yusuf restored allegiance to the Abbasid Caliph, an act that reverberated through the Islamic world. But then Nur ad-Din died suddenly. Syria fell into fragmentation as rival emirs scrambled for power. The Crusader states sensed opportunity, and in Egypt, the quiet vizier who had avoided ambition found it thrust upon him. Yusuf looked outward at the fractured Muslim world, cities bickering, lords betraying each other, Crusader armies tightening their grip. He understood the task laid before him: unify the lands from the Euphrates to the Nile, not for conquest, but for survival. The emirs of Aleppo whispered in their stone halls, pretending loyalty while sharpening resentment like a hidden blade. They feared him not because he demanded obedience, but because his presence revealed their smallness. Salahuddin did nothing to provoke them. He simply existed with a clarity they lacked. Yet envy needs no invitation. It grows in the shadows of competence. He did not waste time with posturing. He sent letters across Syria, not threats, offers of cooperation, promises to honor Nur ad-Din's legacy, invitations to unify against the Crusader kingdoms tightening their grip on Palestine. But unity requires men to silence their egos, and few were willing. The world was splintered by pride long before it was divided by borders. Salahuddin moved methodically. City by city, he restored order, not through fear, but through fairness. In Hama, he reduced oppressive taxes. In Baalbek, he protected Christian villagers from harassment by rogue soldiers, earning their trust as well. In Homs, he replaced corrupt officials with disciplined administrators who worked for the people instead of themselves. Slowly, Syrians began to understand that this man did not seek thrones, he sought cohesion. His governance was simple: justice for all, loyalty from those who received it, discipline from those who walked beneath his banner. But Aleppo resisted, fueled by pride and manipulated by advisors who feared losing influence under Salahuddin's shadow. He rode to the city's gates, not with siege towers, but with patience. A prolonged standoff followed. No battles, only pressure. Food grew scarce inside Aleppo, supplies dwindled. The people questioned their leaders. When at last they surrendered, they did not bow to a conqueror, they exhaled to a liberator. Salahuddin entered respectfully, forbidding looting, disallowing revenge, and protecting the families of men who had spoken against him. He understood something simple: enemies forced into submission create fragile peace. Enemies treated with dignity become allies who never forget mercy. Now Syria, once fractured, began binding itself around him, not through fear, not through inheritance, but through necessity and respect. His creed radiated across the lands: unity first, justice always, dominance never for personal glory. The Crusader lords watched this transformation with burning eyes. They had calculated their victories on the assumption of Muslim disunity. Salahuddin's rise unsettled their arithmetic. Especially men like Reynald de Chatillon, lawless, cruel, intoxicated with violence. Reynald raided caravans, tortured prisoners, defiled treaties as though they were parchment scraps to be burned. He had once vowed to march on Mecca and Medina, laughing as he described using the holy city sanctuaries as stables for his horses. Salahuddin remembered every insult, every murdered traveler, every betrayal. Yet he refused to respond impulsively. War, he reminded his generals, is not a matter of rage. Rage blinds, and I must see clearly. But clarity sharpened into inevitability. With Syria unified and Egypt stable, he turned toward strengthening the heart of his authority. He rebuilt roads that had been abandoned. He restored irrigation channels that fed starving villages. He inspected fortresses personally, walking along parapets with commanders who feared disappointing him more than they feared any enemy. His eyes missed nothing: a loose hinge on a gate, a poorly stored grain sack, a fatigued horse. These details, small to others, were signals to him, symptoms of laxity that spread quietly until it toppled nations. His presence brought an energy the region had not seen in decades. Armies grew disciplined, supply chains functioned with precision, governors operated with new accountability. Even poets began writing verses about a man who could build and destroy with the same calm intention. Still, Salahuddin knew that unity was only the beginning. The true test, the one history would remember, waited farther south. Jerusalem, Al-Quds. The city whose name contained centuries of longing, whose stones had absorbed blood from every corner of the earth. He felt the pull of it, not as ambition, but as duty. He never romanticized war. He never fantasized about banners waving over conquered walls. He understood that Jerusalem represented more than territory. It was memory, identity, the bruised heart of a civilization. But he also knew that reclaiming it meant confronting the strongest crusader force in the region, the Kingdom of Jerusalem under King Guy, supported by the Knights Templar and the monstrous unpredictability of Reynald. Before facing them, Salahuddin prepared meticulously. He created alliances with tribes once ignored by sultans. He removed heavy taxes to inspire loyalty among peasants. He formed new regiments from volunteers who joined not for coin, but for conviction. He negotiated peace in the east to ensure no armies could strike him from behind. Every move was deliberate, every gesture calculated. He studied the Crusader armies, learning their strategies, their reliance on heavy cavalry, their thirst for decisive frontal clashes. He planned not to meet them with equal force, but to dismantle their arrogance. Then came the event that stripped away every remaining restraint. Reynald attacked a caravan traveling under Salahuddin's guarantee of safe passage. Women were taken captive, elderly men were murdered, children sold like animals. Some survivors reached Salahuddin with stories that shook even hardened officers. Salahuddin's response was not rage. It was a chilling, controlled stillness. "He has torn the treaty," he said quietly. "Then let the treaty be torn." War was no longer a question. It was decree. He assembled the largest army the region had seen since Nur ad-Din's time. Soldiers from Egypt, Syria, Mesopotamia, Arabia gathered under a single banner. Banners of green and black and white fluttered across the plains. Drums echoed through valleys. Horses stomped impatiently, sensing the tension that thread through the encampments. But even as he prepared for war, Salahuddin remained Salahuddin. He ordered his soldiers never to harm peasants, never to destroy crops, never to cut trees except for necessity. If we act without restraint, he told them, we become what we claim to fight. The Crusaders moved from their fortresses. Arrogant in their chainmail and shimmering crosses, they assembled at Sephoria, confident that their heavy knights could crush any force. But Salahuddin had no intention of fighting their battle on their terms. He waited until they marched into the dry, scorching plains near the horns of Hattin. The Crusaders, burdened by heat, thirst, and the false courage of commanders who did not understand terrain, walked straight into his design. Salahuddin controlled the water sources. He controlled the high ground. He controlled the rhythm of their exhaustion. Night fell with smoke rising from fires he lit around them. His archers disrupted their sleep. The Crusaders spent the night tossing in heat, parched, trapped in a cage of their own making. Salahuddin observed from a hill, silent, his expression unreadable. He was not celebrating, he was measuring. Dawn arrived like a drawn sword. The Crusaders charged with what strength they had left. Salahuddin's archers answered with storms of arrows. His cavalry swept around their flanks. Their ranks broke. Their horses collapsed. Their banners fell one after another. Dust swallowed them as if the earth itself was erasing their presence. When the fighting ended, the Crusader army, the pride of Jerusalem, was shattered. Reynald was brought before Salahuddin, the man who had mocked prophets, the butcher of caravans, the oath-breaker whose arrogance had cost thousands of lives. He stood trembling now, pale beneath his bravado. Salahuddin offered him water. "Drink," he said, "for thirst is severe on this field." Reynald lifted the cup in shaking hands. As he drank, Salahuddin spoke, "You are my prisoner. I owe you no kindness." Reynald smirked, misunderstanding mercy for weakness. "Kings do not kill kings." "I am no king. I am the one whom you defied."
The road to Jerusalem twisted through valleys where ancient olive trees leaned toward the earth, as if listening for the footsteps of destiny. Salahuddin rode at the front of his army, not triumphantly, but with the heavy, steady calm of a man who understood the gravity of what lay ahead. Behind him stretched a sea of soldiers, hardened veterans from Egypt, disciplined ranks from Syria, tribal cavalry from the desert, archers who had trained since childhood. Yet not a single voice shouted victory songs. The victory at Hattin still echoed in their bodies, but Jerusalem was not a prize to boast about. It was a trust centuries old. When the golden domes of the city first appeared in the distance, shining like a promise suspended between earth and sky, the army slowed. Many dismounted instinctively. Some whispered prayers. Others simply stared, absorbing the moment that generations had yearned for. Salahuddin did not speak. His eyes remained fixed on the walls, tall, ancient, scarred by wars and sieges, holding history within their stones. Jerusalem was defended now by Balian of Ibelin, a noble whose courage Salahuddin respected even before meeting him. Balian had been granted permission to enter the city only to evacuate his family, but once inside, he saw the terror on the faces of the people and stayed to defend them. He had no army, only frightened civilians and a few knights, yet he stood firm. Salahuddin surrounded the city with disciplined precision. No chaos, no desecration, no plunder. He issued strict orders. No soldier was to harm the innocent. No fire was to be set. No building touched. The siege began with a silence so controlled it felt unnatural. Only the sound of catapults and shattering stone broke the stillness. Days passed. Jerusalem resisted, its people desperate but determined. Salahuddin watched from a rise outside the walls, reading the battlefield as he would read a poem, searching for rhythm, waiting for the right stanza to break. He respected their resolve. Courage shown by an enemy was still courage, but he knew the city could not hold. After relentless bombardment, Balian requested parley. He rode out under a white banner, dusty, exhausted, wearing armor dented from impacts. Salahuddin met him in a simple tent, not a palace of victory. The two men sat facing each other, surrounded by the charged stillness of history about to turn. Balian spoke frankly, "If you choose force, the people will burn the city. They will destroy the holy sites. They will kill their wives and children to spare them slavery, and we will die fighting. You will take only ashes." Salahuddin listened, his expression unreadable. The tent held the tension of a sword drawn but not yet swung. Then he answered, "I do not wish for destruction. Jerusalem is sacred to us as it is to you. It was taken with blood once. It will not be taken with blood again." Balian stared at him, disbelief softening into something like relief. They discussed terms, not as enemies locked in hatred, but as men attempting to prevent tragedy. When the agreement was struck, it was unlike any conquest the age had seen. Each Christian could ransom themselves and their families. Those who could not pay would be freed through Salahuddin's own treasury. No church would be burned, no shrine desecrated, no child enslaved. The priests remained. The bells remained. The city would breathe, not bleed. On the day Jerusalem surrendered, Salahuddin entered not with drums or fanfare, but in quiet reverence. He dismounted before the gates and walked barefoot across the stone. Crowds lined the streets, unsure whether to fear or hope. They watched as he ordered the removal of the golden cross placed atop the gum of the rock by earlier conquerors. But he commanded that it be handled with respect, not shattered or mocked. When the call to prayer rose over the city for the first time in nearly 90 years, it echoed not as a declaration of dominance, but as a return after a long absence. The streets filled with movement, merchants selling bread again, families reuniting, prisoners being released from chains by Salahuddin's personal order. Even those who had fought against him whispered astonishment. They had expected the horrors the Crusaders themselves had inflicted decades before: massacres, fire, unrestrained vengeance. Instead, they witnessed justice administered with dignity. Yet Salahuddin's greatest test was not conquest, it was restraint. Offers flooded in: kill them all, erase every crusader, let Europe fear your name. But his answer remained the same: I have not come to punish, I have come to restore. While he reorganized Jerusalem, news traveled like wildfire across Europe. Kings, emperors, and popes trembled at the defeat of their armies and the loss of their holy city. And out of that trembling rose a storm: the Third Crusade. When word reached Salahuddin that Richard of England, Richard the Lionheart, was preparing to cross the sea, he felt no fear, only anticipation. Richard was now not as a brutal butcher, but as a warrior of immense skill and courage. For the first time, Salahuddin would face an equal, not a man of treachery like Reynald, nor a reckless ruler like Guy, a true commander. Before Richard arrived, Salahuddin strengthened every fortress along the coast: Acre, Jaffa, Arsuf, names that would soon become battlegrounds. He reorganized supply lines, made treaties with coastal tribes, and positioned his cavalry in sweeping arcs to intercept approaching armies. And he waited. Richard landed in the Holy Land with the fury of a storm. His tactics were sharp, his discipline ruthless, and his bravery undeniable. Salahuddin watched him from a distance at first, studying his formations, measuring the timing of his charges, noting the precision with which he deployed archers. Their first major clash came near Arsuf. Dust rose in massive clouds, the sound of metal echoed like thunder. Salahuddin's forces attacked, retreated, reformed, struck again, testing, probing, unsettling. Richard's response was swift and brutal. He countered each maneuver with timing that bordered on instinct. Salahuddin admired him as he fought him. Here was a man who did not crumble under pressure, who made decisions not out of anger but analysis. The battle ended without a decisive victor, but each side walked away respecting the other's resolve. From that day forward, their conflict became something unusual for its time, a war of skill, not hatred, of strategy, not slaughter. Messengers rode between their camps exchanging prisoners for water, supplies for safety, and when Richard fell ill, Salahuddin sent him fruit, snow from the mountaintops to cool his fever, and a physician trained in the science of healing. Some commanders questioned this kindness. Salahuddin answered simply, "Kingship is not diminished by compassion." The two men clashed again and again, near Jaffa, at the gates of Jerusalem, along the coastal plains. Each time, Salahuddin fought not as a conqueror defending spoils, but as a guardian defending people. He refused recklessness. He refused waste of life. He refused hubris. And slowly, both armies began to see something extraordinary. These were not two men trying to destroy each other. They were two peaks of the same mountain, pushing each other to greater heights. A strange respect grew between them, a respect recorded by chroniclers on both sides. But wars do not last forever, even when both commanders stand unbroken. Richard knew he could not take Jerusalem. Salahuddin knew Europe would send more armies if peace did not come. And so, after years of ferocious yet honorable battle, the two agreed to a truce. Christian pilgrims were granted safe access to Jerusalem. Coastal towns were divided. The bloodshed halted. Salahuddin watched Richard depart from the shores of Acre, still proud, still undefeated, still carrying the iron determination of a lion. He felt admiration, not bitterness. The world had seen a war fought without cruelty. But Salahuddin's strength was not infinite. He had carried the burdens of empires for decades, the endless campaigns, negotiations, reconciliations, reforms. They carved invisible wounds deeper than any blade.
The winter after Richard departed settled over the land like a quiet exhale. The fields grew still. The roads emptied of marching feet, and the sound of clashing armor faded into memory. For the first time in many years, Salahuddin had no armies to chase and no banners to confront. Yet peace did not loosen the strain in his shoulders. A lifetime of vigilance does not unwind in a single season. He traveled through the regions he had fought so long to unify, moving without grand ceremony. In every town he visited, crowds gathered, children climbing onto rooftops to glimpse him, elders blessing him, soldiers standing straighter just because he passed. But he did not linger in their praise. He studied the conditions of the villages, checked the irrigation channels, evaluated granaries, listened to merchants complain about tariffs, and ordered relief for farmers devastated by drought. He walked among the people not as a ruler above them, but as a guardian moving through his responsibilities. What no one saw was how exhaustion crept through him quietly. His face remained stern and composed, but his body bore the imprint of decades on horseback, nights without sleep, and battles fought under a burning sun. His physicians urged him to rest. Salahuddin gave them the same answer he had given for years. When the people rest, I will rest. But the people never truly rested. The borders needed watching. The fragile peace with the Crusader remnants needed constant negotiation. Tribal disputes needed arbitration. Governors needed oversight. And beyond all that, Salahuddin still dreamed of strengthening Jerusalem, repairing its mosques, rebuilding its walls, restoring its neglected homes. He spent long evenings walking the narrow streets, listening to the murmurs of traders and pilgrims, studying the architecture of ancient towers as though reading the soul of the city through stone. Sometimes he stood on the steps of the Dome of the Rock long after night had swallowed the sky, staring out over the quiet rooftops. Wine cellars slept. Candle flames flickered behind shutters. The wind carried faint prayers from distant houses. In those silent hours, his thoughts drifted to people who had shaped him but were no longer beside him. His father, with his quiet dignity, his uncle, Sherku, Nur ad-Din, whose shadow he once walked in, comrades lost in countless battles. Their absence felt heavier than any armor he had worn. Despite the peace, Salahuddin never let the army grow soft. He inspected regiments personally, corrected sword grips, adjusted stances, pushed archers to hit moving targets at impossible distances. Discipline to him was not cruelty, it was survival. He believed that peace preserved without readiness was an illusion waiting to collapse. He also reminded his officers of something they sometimes forgot during victory. Arrogance is deadlier than any enemy. Victory, he said, must sit lightly on the shoulders. The moment you feel too tall, you begin to fall. But whispers of his fatigue spread through the court. Some said he looked thinner. Others noticed the way he pressed a hand to his chest when climbing stairs. A few loyal attendants, those closest to him, exchanged worried glances when they saw how slowly he rose from kneeling in prayer. Yet whenever they tried to speak, he silenced them gently. "My body is a guest. Let it behave as it wishes. My duty remains." What truly strained him were not the obligations of governance, but the responsibilities he refused to surrender. Personally mediating tribal disputes, personally rehearsing military formations, personally overseeing the distribution of charity during famine. His concept of leadership had always been intimacy with the people, not delegation. But that intimacy grew heavier with every passing month. When word came that another crusader force might attempt to regroup in coastal cities, some urged him to launch a preemptive strike. But Salahuddin shook his head. To press a man while he is wounded is unnecessary. To destroy him when his strength returns is foolish. Leave them be. Their ambition is exhausted. He understood the ebb and flow of human will better than many generals understood swords. Letters arrived from Europe, some respectful, others bitter. Monarchs and nobles who had fought against him wrote of admiration, frustration, and even gratitude for the mercy he had shown. Chroniclers recorded that Richard, in conversation long after returning home, spoke of Salahuddin with a mixture of admiration and longing. "If I could choose," Richard said, "I would have this man as my friend, not my enemy." Salahuddin never heard the words directly, but he would not have been surprised. He had sensed the same respect on the battlefield. Spring returned, painting the fields in soft greens and golds. Salahuddin traveled to Damascus, the city he loved most, the place where Nur ad-Din's memory lingered in every stone. Damascus welcomed him like a returning father. Flowers were placed in the fountains, musicians played in the marketplaces, and scholars waited outside the mosques to present their latest writings to him. He smiled faintly, touched by their devotion, but the fatigue in his eyes deepened. One evening in Damascus, as the call to prayer faded into the dusk, he walked alone in the gardens of his palace. Orange blossoms scented the air. The water in the fountains shimmered beneath torchlight. He paused by a stone bench and sat, feeling a heaviness in his chest, unlike anything before. He closed his eyes, steadying his breath. It passed, slowly, but the fear it carried stayed behind. His physicians begged him to reduce his travels. He dismissed them. Yet even he could not ignore the signs for long. There were days when rising from bed required more effort than leading a cavalry charge. Nights when sleep refused him, not from anxiety, but from pain he could not name. Still, he forced himself to continue. A kingdom held together by will alone does not allow its king to show weakness. But the body has limits, even for the greatest of men. Late in the year, fever gripped him. At first he brushed it aside, insisting on attending court sessions, reviewing petitions, walking through the streets he loved. His attendants saw him stumble once when descending stairs. He laughed it off, but the laughter carried strain. Within days, the fever worsened. His vision blurred. His strength evaporated. He collapsed while trying to mount his horse, and only then did he allow his physicians to confine him to bed. Damascus held its breath. The palace, usually alive with soldiers, scholars, visitors, fell into a hush broken only by the hurried footsteps of attendants and the quiet prayers of imams reciting verses outside his chamber. Crowds gathered outside the palace walls, whispering updates, hoping for signs of recovery. Merchants closed their shops early. Mothers told their children to pray for him. Even travelers from distant villages brought small vials of blessed water and herbs, offering whatever they could to help him. Inside the dimly lit room, Salahuddin lay wrapped in blankets, sweat glistening on his forehead. The fever burned through him with relentless cruelty. His vision blurred. His strength evaporated. He had yet another question to ask his attendants, and the last with his sons by his side. "What day is it today?" he asked his two sons, who seemed taken by the fever's weight. "It is Wednesday, Father," they said, bitterly. "Then today is the day I must meet God." He said his final prayers and passed away.
Word spread through Damascus like a low, trembling whisper. Salahuddin was fading. At first, the rumor felt impossible, like hearing that the mountains themselves were collapsing. But as days passed and no reassuring message came from the palace, disbelief turned into dread. The markets grew quieter. The laughter of children faded. Even the animals in the courtyards seemed unsettled, as if sensing a shift in the air itself. Clerics walked the streets reciting prayers. The city's fountains ran slower, their gentle murmurs drowned by thousands of footsteps heading toward the palace walls. People came not to demand, not to shout, but simply to exist nearer to the man who had shaped their lives in ways too vast to measure. They stood for hours, farmers, craftsmen, soldiers still wearing pieces of armor, widows who had lost husbands to wars he fought, merchants who owed him prosperity. Many remembered not the great battles, but the quiet acts, the grain he distributed during famine, the justice he gave when corrupt officials stole their dues, the mercy he showed to those who could offer nothing in return. Inside the dim chamber, Salahuddin drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams. Sometimes he saw cities he had liberated, Jerusalem glowing beneath a golden sky, Damascus wrapped in green gardens, Cairo bustling with voices from every corner of the world. Sometimes he saw faces he had lost, Shirka's booming laugh echoing through war camps, Nur ad-Din's stern gaze softening into approval, soldiers who had died with his name on their lips. But there were moments of clarity, fragile yet unmistakable. During one of them, he motioned weakly for his treasurer. The attendants helped the old man kneel beside him. Salahuddin's voice was little more than a breath. "How much is left in my treasury?" The treasurer hesitated, unable to speak. Salahuddin repeated the question, his tone soft but insistent.
Finally, the treasurer bowed his head. "Nothing, my lord. You've left nothing for yourself." He swallowed hard. "Every coin you possessed you gave away, to the poor, the widows, the orphans, the soldiers who needed horses, the scholars, the travelers. There is not enough to cover even the cost of your shroud." Salahuddin closed his eyes, not of regret, but of peace. He whispered, "Praise be to God. Then I leave this world as I entered it, with nothing." His sons heard this exchange, and tears burned in their eyes. They had seen rulers hoard wealth enough to drown cities, yet this man, who controlled lands from Yemen to the Euphrates, died without a single gold coin to his name. His legacy was not measured in treasure, but in choices that had shaped millions of lives. The fever surged again, stealing his strength. His breath came shallow and uneven. His attendants cooled his skin, but the heat returned relentlessly. Outside the chamber, generals bowed their heads as the muffled sounds of his labored breathing slipped through the cracks of the wooden door. Night after night, scholars gathered with candles, reciting prayers that flickered against the walls like trembling shadows. One of them, a man who had known Salahuddin since his early days under Nur ad-Din, whispered, "If faith alone could keep him alive, he would outlive us all. But faith has its own laws, and even the greatest souls must answer them." In his final hours, he asked to be turned toward the Qibla. His attendants moved him gently. The pain etched lines across his face, but he did not cry out. He began to recite verses from the Quran, though his voice was faint, barely audible. One of his sons leaned close, tears falling onto the blanket. Salahuddin's lips moved with the words of surrender and trust, the same words that he had carried into every battle, every negotiation, every moment of uncertainty. As dawn approached, the city sensed the shift. A silence descended, spreading from the palace outward like a slow, inevitable wave. Birds that usually greeted sunrise with spirited cries stayed quiet. Guards who never flinched on the battlefield looked at the sky as if expecting it to change color. Salahuddin inhaled deeply, as if drawing in the last breath of a world he had worked tirelessly to protect. His eyes opened for a moment, calm, unafraid, aware. A faint smile touched his lips, not of victory, but of release. Then, with breath that faded like a candle's final flicker, the man who had outwitted kings and commanded continents slipped gently from life. The stillness that followed was unlike anything Damascus had ever known. For a moment, the entire city seemed to hold its breath, stunned by the enormity of what had passed. Then grief erupted, not as chaos, but as a wave of deep, raw mourning. Men who had stood fearlessly beside him in battle dropped to their knees. Women wept openly in the streets. Even the stern-faced generals, men carved from discipline and iron, wept like children. News traveled with impossible speed. From Jerusalem to Aleppo, from Cairo to Mosul, from the deserts of Arabia to the mountains of Armenia, word carried across trade routes, whispered in caravans, shouted in military camps, announced in mosques. Everywhere the reaction echoed the same mixture of sorrow, disbelief, reverence. They prepared his burial with a tenderness rarely granted to rulers. His body was washed gently, perfumed lightly, wrapped in simple white cloth, unchanged from the tradition of the prophets. There was no gold embroidery, no jewels, no armor laid beside him. He had forbidden extravagance. He had always believed that the grave was the great equalizer. Tens of thousands followed the bier through the streets of Damascus. The crowd seemed endless, scholars walking barefoot, soldiers carrying their helmets at their sides, elders leaning on canes, children too young to understand but old enough to feel the weight of the moment. No drums played, no banners waved. Only the sound of collective grief filled the streets, quiet sobbing, whispered prayers, the heavy shuffle of feet. They buried him near the Umayyad Mosque, close to the heart of the city he loved. As earth fell softly onto his grave, a hush fell again. Many expected the moment to feel like an ending, a closing chapter, but instead it felt like something larger, an inheritance passed into the hands of those left behind. In the days following, his chamber was opened. Inside, they found only 3 things: a sword, worn from decades of grip, a Quran, pages softened by countless readings, and a small tattered cloak patched repeatedly over the years. There were no chests of gold, no scrolls of conquest, no treasures seized from enemies. Instead, there was the unmistakable, unadorned truth of a man who had wielded immense power, yet lived like a servant of his people. In the nights after his death, elders told stories beneath lamplight. Stories of the boy who preferred books to swords, the young man who followed Shirkuh into Egypt reluctantly, the leader who united fractured lands not with tyranny, but with patience, the warrior who faced kings without arrogance, the liberator who reclaimed Jerusalem without vengeance. Some spoke of the time he spared the life of a terrified young crusader soldier who had dropped his weapon and fled. Others recalled how he personally stopped his own troops from harming captured civilians. Still others remembered how he gave away his last coins to a widow in Damascus, saying, "She needs them more than I do." Time passed, but his memory did not fade. It settled into the soil, into the stories of parents teaching their children, into the echoes of mosques calling the faithful to prayer. His legacy was not marble or gold, but the transformation he carved into a world drowning in conflict. And across the centuries, even those who had fought him remembered him with admiration. Chroniclers in Europe wrote not of a barbarian enemy, but of a man worthy of honor, one whose mercy had outshone their own generals, whose character had transcended the age he lived in.